I'm not one to shy away from controversy, which is why today I'm going to answer the question, is feminism a cult? And today I'm going to answer that question by taking a deep dive into feminism's tactics and the impacts of them, and then comparing them to the tactics and impacts of typical cults. Join me as we uncover the truth and expose the reality that defines feminism. Hi, my name is Dan, and if this is your first time here, welcome to Men Need to Be Heard, the channel dedicated to raising awareness on the issues that men and boys face in today's society. And one of the biggest, if not the biggest issues that men face is how feminism views and treats men, and perhaps more importantly, how it tries to teach all women to have those same views about men. Something it goes about doing literally from the time they're born and until the day they die. Now, before the angry comments start flooding in, and I know they will because it's how feminism responds to criticism, this isn't about hating women or pretending that real gender issues don't exist. This is about examining how the modern feminist movement behaves and operates through the very same frameworks that we use to define cults. And spoiler alert, they do it really, really well. Let's dive in. Have you ever noticed how certain groups online act like they're in a cult? Now, to be clear, I'm not talking about people dressing in robes and chanting in the woods. I mean movements that aggressively police what you're allowed to say, think, and believe, and who seek to punish anyone who steps out of line, who doesn't repeat the narrative they've decided is the only one people are allowed to repeat. And today, we're going to talk about one of the biggest social movements that operates just like that, which is modern feminism. But before we do, we need to ask the question, what is a cult? So what exactly is a cult? Now, rather than give you my definition, let's be fair about this and go to the books. According to Merriam-Webster, a cult is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object or objects. Based on that alone, we can safely say that feminism is in fact a cult because it's based on the veneration and devotion of women. But it goes much deeper than that. Modern psychology uses frameworks like Stephen Hassan's BITE model to identify cult-like behavior in political movements, social ideologies, even social media communities. If you've never heard of it, BITE stands for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. The key word being, as you probably noticed in all of them, control, which again, feminism displays on a consistent, dare I say, constant basis. Control of the media, control of education, control of the narrative, and ultimately, control of women. Other ways to define cults, according to the Cult Education Institute, is through classic cult traits, up to and including isolating members from outsiders, punishing dissent, controlling language, and demonizing those who choose to leave. For any of you who have ever seen what happens to a woman who dares to step out of line, who dares to speak up for men or even care about them, you know that that is exactly how feminism treats them. It demonizes those women, punishes them, tries to destroy them, all because they're going against the narrative that the cult of feminism has decided must be. And we're going to dive a bit deeper and show how modern feminism perfectly fits the definition of a cult. We're going to start by looking at how they control behavior. Controlling behavior. What I argue is the definition of what makes a cult. Cults regulate how their members act, and as I just mentioned, feminism is no different, especially with regard to how it views and treats women who go against their norm. Anyone who's paid attention knows how modern feminism aggressively polices other women's behavior. It tries to control it, far more so than men have ever done. While they love to claim it's the patriarchy that's oppressing women, in reality, it's feminism that does, especially, as I said, for those that don't fall in line. Ever heard the term pick me? It's a derogatory label that feminists love to slap on women who publicly say that they like their husband or boyfriend, that they love them. They throw it at women who say that they enjoy cooking for their husbands or taking care of them, or who want to be stay-at-home moms, or, heaven forbid, actually like men in general and don't see them as oppressors or something to be demonized. And when feminists see those women, they target them. They use social media mobbing, public shaming, and cancel culture tactics to try and ostracize women like this. The goal, of course, being to try and silence those women and force them back into ideological submission. Feminists display the very oppression towards those women that they've projected onto men for decades now. And no one ever bats an eye at it. No one in the media ever points it out. And why is that? Because feminism controls the flow of information, and has for some time now. Let's dive into that next. A core tenet of any cult is how they control the flow of information to their members. They decide what the group will know and then seek to hide any information that goes against whatever they want them to know. And in feminist spaces, that's no different. In fact, I've long argued they are the GOAT of controlling information. Any reasonable person knows that currently, and for some time now, feminism has controlled the mainstream media, controlled the message that has gone out to the masses. And in most cases, they've manipulated that message, even going so far as to outright lie and misrepresent things until they become truth. Things such as claiming there's a wage gap, or the most recent one, that there's a male loneliness epidemic, when in fact both are complete fiction. Something I've shown in prior videos in my Falsehood of Feminism series, which I'll link down below. In the past 20 years, as social media has become our town square, we've seen how the feminist message is now driving that, and how it is not only in control of that message, but actively works to silence and oppress anyone who doesn't conform to it. Only a fool would say that the various social media companies aren't in lockstep with the feminist ideology. So much so that, as my followers know, accounts like mine get their videos or posts suppressed, or even banned, even when they're based on irrefutable facts. Countless examples exist where men are allowed to say anything they want, while men will lose their accounts for even the most innocuous of things. Perhaps the best example I can think of was the hashtag #BillAllMen, except it wasn't Bill. It was another word that rhymes with Bill, but that I can't mention. And that word, that hashtag, was used by women on their videos and on social media for years, to the tune of tens, if not hundreds of millions of times, before it was finally taken down. Yet during that same period, anyone who used the hashtag, we'll call it #BillAllWomen, lost their accounts immediately with no hope of getting them back. I know, because it happened to me. It continues on even today, where feminists aggressively work to suppress conversations about things like male unaliving rates, workplace deaths, or fathers' rights in family court. They like to call it hate speech or being red-pilled. There are entire groups on Discord and private Facebook groups that are dedicated by feminists towards attacking those who speak out on men's issues, to trying to get the accounts taken down, get the men and the women silenced. The truth is, if anyone mentions anything about men's issues, you're going to immediately face a storm of criticism at best. You're going to be accused of whataboutism or derailing the important conversation, which of course is always women's issues. They view it as a zero-sum game. Then of course there's education, starting in preschool and going all the way into college. where the academic narrative is women and only women. While boys and young men are forced to undergo harassment training, girls usually face no such requirement. Instead, they're taught how they should define harassment, which often is portrayed as something as simple as a hello or a good morning. They're told they should view that as a threat. Gender studies programs are exclusively for women, and feminist literature, which more often than not excludes or distorts data that challenges their worldview. That literature pervades even into subjects like math and science. Critical research on topics like false allegations, parental alienation, or the impact of fatherless homes gets buried or dismissed as misogynistic propaganda. While studies with predetermined outcomes, which are designed to support women, are funded with millions upon millions of dollars. Anyone who dares to go against the feminist narrative is ostracized, excluded to the point they'll have their scholarships taken away or perhaps even get thrown out of school. Educators and professors who don't conform face the same sort of treatment, being denied tenure, denied access to promotions and positions, not to mention being doxxed, not just by their fellow educators, but the administration as well. It's all about the control of information in order to achieve the next goal, which is thought control. Most people understand that when it comes to cults, members are expected to conform to a rigid belief system, one that allows for no deviation, no counter beliefs, or even questioning of the beliefs. Feminism has its own ideological purity tests. You either believe the wage gap is caused solely by discrimination, that masculinity is toxic, and that women are perpetual victims of the patriarchy, or you're accused of having internalized misogyny. There's no room for nuance, no room for questioning or debate, no room for alternative viewpoints. You either hate men and demonize them, dismiss their issues and traumas, and do everything you can to silence them, or you're a traitor to women, a traitor to society. And it's been that way for the better part of 4 generations now. So deep has the thought control become that we've literally reached a point where we can no longer even have a true definition of what a woman actually is. Feminism has sought to devalue what used to be thought of as what makes a woman, to the point that they've even convinced women that being in relationships with men, even being mothers, is somehow detrimental to them. Think about that for a second. They've actually got us to the point that they've convinced women that giving birth, being a mother, is something to be disdained, something to be avoided, something that is going to wreck their life. All because by doing so, it somehow makes them inferior or oppressed. Even a certain doctor who was the minister of propaganda for an evil dictatorship would have to sit back and admire that feat. We've reached a point in society where most women, especially the younger ones, believe to their core that the path to happiness is by focusing on a career, by essentially becoming men. Sadly, as many have found out, and even more will, that promise, that belief, only leads to misery and sadness. There's a reason why more than a quarter of women in the United States are now being treated medically for depression, and a hell of a lot more are self-medicating with their boxed wine and Ambien. And it's why, as they get older, these women who were told to shun motherhood, shun men, shun family and relationships, end up so bitter, because they believed what they were told, only to end up alone with no prospects, no family, no children, no future. I argue that feminism has done more to hurt women than anything they claim men have done, and it's done by controlling their thought processes, by convincing them that feminism is the path to happiness, when in fact the proof shows that it's a path to misery, just like is found in cults. And it's why they attack so voraciously any woman who questions the narrative, labeling her a traitor, a victim of brainwashing, or worse, a trad wife. They claim to be all about choice, all about freedom, all about the sisterhood. Yet, no one seeks to control women and their ability to choose more than feminism and feminists. They do so by controlling their mind and by using women's emotional tendencies against them. And we're going to look at that next. One of the ways that cults manipulate their members is by weaponizing their emotions against them, using things like guilt, shame, and fear to maintain loyalty. Feminism has perfected this tactic. Women are told from the time they're little girls that they're somehow betraying the sisterhood if they want to prioritize family or support men's issues or disagree in any way with the feminist narrative, the feminist rhetoric. They're told they aren't just hurting themselves, but all women by stepping out of line. Ultimately, they're shunned, mocked, ridiculed, and tormented, often till they break. And they don't just stop there. Oh no, my friends. Feminists will then target her children, her family, her career, her very existence. I know of at least 4 female creators in the men's space who've been doxxed to the point that their employers have been contacted or their husbands' employers, anything they can to take away their jobs and source of income. These women have often received multiple death threats from other women, been told outright that they deserve to be R'd or SA'd. In a couple of cases I know, they've even had women show up at their house making threats to harm them or their children. It's all done to create fear, to try and manipulate those women emotionally into silence. Feminists do these things all while claiming to be supportive of women's choices, supportive of a woman's right to choose. The reality is, they're actually seeking to deny women the right to choose anything that doesn't conform with the feminist-approved narrative. The truth is, emotional manipulation isn't just a feature of modern feminism, it's their core strategy, and one they've mastered. And they continue to do so by spreading a falsehood, the infamous "it's all men till it's no men" mentality, the one that has taken root. We're going to explore that one next. A trait that you'll find in almost every cult is that they'll create a boogeyman. They'll create a boogeyman and fear of that boogeyman. It's a classic cult move. And feminism, as we all know, has turned men, all men, into the ultimate boogeyman. Something to be feared, something to be afraid of, something that is lesser, not worthy of caring or consideration. Something that is to be avoided, ostracized, and shunned. They've created so much fear in women that many of them will not leave their houses anymore. Let that one sink in. For decades now, feminists have demonized men as a collective, labeling them oppressors, predators, or threats. This despite the fact that well less than 1% of men actually present any kind of a threat to women. Roughly, by the way, the same number as women who present a threat to men. How many times have you heard feminists make claims that women should be afraid to leave their homes or walk the streets? That they can never know if a man is safe to be around or not, so you should just assume he's a risk. All while going absolutely apoplectic when you point out to them that based on that logic, their logic, the same could be assumed about them and women in general. In the past decade, they created and mushroomed the Me Too movement, actively encouraging women to assume the worst in men, and then make false allegations against the men based on those assumptions. It's believe all women, even when there's irrefutable, overwhelming evidence that their claims are false, outright lies. The goal, of course, is, as cults seek to do, isolating their members, making them dependent on the cult, something today's feminism has achieved beyond their wildest dreams. It's why they all run around telling women how strong and independent they are and how they don't need no man, hoping to convince them to go it alone. So one day they'll become dependent on the cult for their very survival, their very existence. And again, let me repeat it. Feminism has succeeded in that beyond its wildest dreams. More women are alone than ever, with estimates being that almost half of all women will be without a partner by 2030, and the projections after that are even worse. Feminism has not only succeeded in convincing women to avoid relationships, but men as well. In fact, I'd argue they've succeeded in convincing men to walk away from dating, relationships, and marriage, far more so than they have women. To the point now that we've ended up lowering the marriage and birth rates in many countries to the point where those societies are going to fail as a result. And I ask you, to what end? Well, simply as I've mentioned, to ensure that women become dependent on the cult for their survival, the cult of feminism. There's a reason why there's hundreds of government programs and institutions focused on women, while nary a one for men. Because the cult needs women to believe that the government will be there for them. The government will provide for them. Yet, as we've seen time and again throughout history, governments don't operate for the benefit of their citizens in those situations, but to their detriment. And it doesn't stop there, as we've pointed out repeatedly throughout this video. They will attack anyone they need to in order to achieve their goals, most especially those women who disagree with them, who disagree with feminism. The ones, as we've already talked about, that they've labeled pick-me's or handmaidens or anti-women. Creating the boogeyman gives them a means to spread the mantra of the cult through fear, through intimidation, and through manipulation. And when that doesn't work, they seek to punish the defectors as an example to others who may dare or even think about escaping. One of the most definitive, dare I say, the most definitive signs that something is a cult is how they will target anyone who even thinks about leaving the cult, let alone does. Again, feminism has mastered this better than anyone. When a woman leaves feminism or speaks out against it, the backlash is immediate and vicious. Public figures like Camille Paglia, Christina Huff Summers, or Lauren Southern have been endlessly harassed for not towing the feminist line. Erin Pizzey, who started the very first domestic violence shelter back in the early 70s, has spent her entire life looking over her shoulder. Ms. Pizzey has received multiple threats on her life. She's been boycotted and defamed. She was even exiled from the UK for daring to go against the feminist narrative, the one that says women and only women can be victims of domestic violence. And it's not just public figures. Everyday women on TikTok or Twitter or any of the social medias who say they don't identify as feminists end up getting doxxed, threatened, and mobbed, as we discussed earlier. That is cult behavior, plain and simple. As I've mentioned, feminism, while being a problem for men and hurting them in many ways by making them the target of feminist disdain, actually ends up hurting women far more so. Feminism traps women in a victim mindset, teaching them that they're powerless, oppressed, incapable of thriving without feminist intervention. It shames women for embracing traditional roles, marriage, motherhood, even femininity itself. It shames women for wanting to be women. And in the end, it ends up hurting society as a whole. It has divided men and women into hostile camps to the point they no longer talk or interact with each other. It discourages open, honest conversations. It has turned relationships into battlegrounds, outright war, and worst of all, it silences legitimate conversations about real gender issues, the ones that actually need addressing. In the long run, feminism is going to lead us down a path towards the destruction of society, a path we're already well down. If it continues, ultimately, it's going to lead to the destruction of the human race. I don't say that lightly or hyperbolically. The data is already showing the decline of our society. Education is failing. our societal infrastructure as well. Poverty and crime rates are skyrocketing. Marriage rates are a fraction of what they once were. Birth rates are falling precipitously. None of that is good for society. And there's a whole list of other things that I didn't mention. None of it certainly isn't good for women. And it all lies at the foot of feminism. Yet, not only is feminism continuing to push their agenda, they're seeking to expand it, which again is only going to end up speeding the decline. And they simply don't care. So pervasive is the cult, so pervasive is the mindset that drives the cult, that they're willing to destroy everything we've built as a society in order to maintain and grow the cult. They do so even while knowing that in the long run, it may and likely will end up destroying the cult and every member within it. We all know about the Jim Jones incident, and if you don't, you can go look it up. That's where they drank the Kool-Aid. That's where that phrase comes from. Well, feminism is and has been serving its own version of the Kool-Aid to society for years now. So is modern feminism a cult? Well, I think you already know the answer to that, because by every definition of cult behavior, the answer is definitively yes. It doesn't just check the boxes, it obliterates them. And that's not a good thing for anyone. I'm not here to say women shouldn't advocate for themselves or that men don't have problems of their own, but to continue to ignore the reality, ignore what feminism has done and continues to do, will only result in the end of our world as we know it, in the end of our society. We need to see feminism for what it really is, which is a cult. One we should be wary of, just like we should be wary of any organization or movement that tries to control thought, behavior, and emotions, and who punishes anyone who doesn't follow their narrative or tries to leave. That's not empowerment. That's manipulation. That is what defines a cult and defines feminism. So let me know what you think. Do you think feminism is a cult? What can or should we do about it? How can we help its members to see the light? Or should I say, can we help them? Let me know down in the comments. And if you've seen these behaviors or had your own run-ins with feminist gatekeepers, drop your story in the comments. I love hearing about them, and the more we talk and share them, the more we expose feminism for what it really is. And if you have found this analysis valuable, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Let's help spread the word, because conversations like this deserve to be heard. All right, that's it for now. Till next time, this is Dan. Have an awesome day.